We're going to do a quick demo of a new feature we have in Notebooks called Snapshots. Now, before we get into it, let's set the stage for a moment. What are we solving for with snapshots? Well, imagine you have a notebook, and you can use notebooks for many things, right? Sometimes you might want to put together a notebook full of useful charts and annotate those charts to make it easier to enable other team members, or even just to document things that you would do regularly. Like, let's say you're trying to respond to a particular type of incident, like a latency spike in your web app. You could put together a dashboard, but maybe you want to have some more explicit instructions there, and maybe you want to make it easy for folks to kind of add charts to that over time. Well, a notebook's a great tool for that. But let's say you're using notebooks for an investigation use case. Like, let's say you had an incident and you're trying to put together all of the kind of facts and useful information and data about that incident. Well, you're describing something that happened at a point in time. So when you share that around, you want to make sure that we retain all of that information, and you also want to make sure that people can edit that in a way that is not going to cause that information to disappear. Now, in that last case, the disappearing data, that's something that is a risk for our users today. So we'll get into the demo now, and you can kind of see what happens here. So in this case, we have a metric chart, and I'm looking at May 31st through June 6th. For context, it's June 10th. So the last date in this range is about 4 days ago. Now, let's say that maybe I move this back a little bit or forward a little bit. It doesn't really matter, right? Because we're using metric data in this query, and we store metric data for 13 months. There's no problem. But if we go down to a span chart and we try and move this is looking at data from June 6th, so again, 4 days ago, and we have to also acknowledge that this environment has our default 3 days worth of retention. Now, if I try and change this date, I'm going to get an error. Data for this query falls outside of your data retention period. If you edit this query, you may lose that data. So what can we do? Well, we can duplicate this query with the latest data. That gives us the ability to preserve the original chart. But if I'm going to be sharing this with somebody else, I don't want to necessarily have to worry that they're going to do the right thing and they're not going to be kind of destructive with their own work inside of this notebook. So we've built into the sharing experience a new way to share notebooks. And so at the top, you'll see that you can share the notebook itself, so anyone can come in and edit the notebook, or you can share a read-only snapshot of that notebook. And what happens is we take basically the current state of that notebook, we package it up, and we make that something that can't be edited. So there's a couple of benefits here. We'll show you when we get into the snapshot version itself, but right off the bat, you can also see that this allows us to retain a really nice history of what actually goes on, what changes have been made, and kind of the living way that these notebooks can be modified over time. So I can go back to a version of this notebook snapshot that I created on May 17th. I can open that up, and you'll see that the data and the queries and everything reflect what I was looking at that time. So I was looking at some metric data from the 12th, I was looking at some span data from the 9th, and one of the things that you'll notice is we've made it really easy for users to consume the information in this notebook while taking away all of the things that might have them experience like a degraded experience. So we show them right at the top that they're viewing a notebook snapshot. We give them a link to open the original notebook. We, if you open up the query, make it so that you can't actually edit that query while making it still very easy to see what that query is. And for features like our deviation analysis and change intelligence, which rely on a baseline and a deviation window that you can kind of customize, we gray that out because the time window here falls outside of our data retention period. So as a user trying to consume this information, especially for investigative purposes, I have everything I need, all of the kind of information that's been annotated and formatted, but I don't have any risk of actually changing this in a way that is going to be destructive for either myself or for anybody else who might want to view this notebook.